I think after last week's episode and how crazy it became, I think most people who watch this show had this episode as one of their most anticipated of the week. For me personally, it was my most anticipated because holy shit, what a horrifying turn of events, and they up the ante in this week. I mean, I was expecting some gruesome stuff, but I mean, still, just the way she would snap her own head or rip her arms off to feed her creatures. I mean, the fact that this is essentially the pinky of the true source of chaos behind that fog wall is absolutely batshit terrifying. There is no way in hell you could actually defeat the full thing. And the fact that the only reason that pinky got out is because of essentially Akari's powers making a very tiny, and I mean tiny ass hole that some little blob got through and is causing all the ruckus we're currently seeing. And based on the ending of this episode, you know, I love the fact that she's basically making a movie, and I love how that childlike innocence really gets through. For her, it's nothing more than playtime. She's perfectly fine dropping information and giving info to who should be the enemy she's trying to kill. Like, hey, there's actually a way to go back to Japan. Kind of makes everything a bit different, given the whole point was to get killed by your best friend here who actually wants to kill you. But is there a way for you and her to escape this hell-forsaken land? Who the hell knows? But in terms of the actual animation we got teased at the end there, yeah, it's a 3D model in this like centipede-like form, but based on the movements, I have to say I like the 3D they're using there. A lot of what she was doing in terms of her giant monstrosity, the tentacles and stuff, was hand-drawn. But given what she's about to do in next week's episode, it's no surprise they went 3D, but I have to say, I like what I'm seeing so far. 3D haters will always hate 3D no matter what, but I think in terms of how they blended it with this misty environment, I think they did a hell of a good job. But what an episode, man. There was so much that, like, I felt foolish initially because when they initially sealed her away using, like, the cathedral and, like, she was turned into a ball, and the way they explained it, like, it's essentially an infinity loop of just crushing her and imprisoning her, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is dealt with, but probably something with the fog wall will be, like, the next objective. And then it all just came crashing and burning, and I was like, well, I have pie on my face here, because I actually thought they won for a brief moment. But it's interesting, right? Because by separating Akari and Menno and just seeing the difference of what they're dealing with is quite interesting. On one hand, you have a girl who can basically erase and freeze and do all these amazing things, but with each action, she loses more and more of who she is. And from what she's saying, she's fine not remembering anything other than her best friend, the person that she cherishes. However, eventually there's got to be no more memories left that even then she won't be able to remember her. There's got to be that fear, which is why she's pulling her punches a little more than usual, at least based on some of the earlier episodes. But I have to say, I like what the subtitles did in this episode, because often when you have like visual symbolism, you just have to either know it, look at someone who does know it, or just be oblivious to it. But the fact that when they're talking about her in Japan, the fact that they show these flowers on the desk, it says like what the flowers represent, meaning most likely someone was killed, and the fact that they also say that she was bullied. I like the fact that they're going the extra mile, because even though I think visual symbolism most of the time should be left open to interpretation, there's a lot of stuff with cultural impacts that unless you're really into that culture, you're not going to know. So I thought it was a nice detail that they added in there. And I just have to say, like, this episode in general was just, it was so good. I'm glad that last week wasn't a fluke, that the grotesqueness, the impact of not expecting it, it wasn't just shock value that sold it to me. It was more so that this is like the best villain we've seen in this show. And we had an incredible villain who ended up being just a small piece of the puzzle, who I was like, normally I wouldn't want to see gone because you can't just up after having such an amazing antagonist. But lo and behold, you know, this is everything. It's so creepy because for her, she wants to make a movie. And the fact that it's not about world domination, it's not about, you know, this master plan of breaking free. It's simply for her that child innocence of making a movie. This world doesn't have movies, so you're gonna be the movie. And the fact that she's playing with all the different tropes, like the ultimate form, using all your energy. The fact that you have something that pure of evil. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think most of the time, having villains that are well written to the point of master plans and doing all these like complex things, that's important. And not everything should just be Dio or this, right? I mean, they serve their purposes, but you have to write him in such a way to make him work. And this is one of those cases that it does work alongside someone like Dio, who is just evil as shit. And I love the fact that this show, in the face of people who have so much going on and so much on their plate, to have this be such a standstill, what an absolutely insane antagonist. And I'm glad that they brought back the princess, and I love seeing her just generally, like, frightened of what might have happened to Momo, and just the fact that, you know, working together in that way was so cool. And that's why, of course, in the back of your mind, you know, the initial defeat, it can't be. It's a movie, right? It's the classic trope. You thought you killed me, but here's my true form. And unfortunately for them, she has quite a few true forms. I mean, it's hard to say where we go with the last stretch here, but I'm excited, if not terrified, because they reveal so much. Not only the fact that apparently Flair is the reason that shit is going wrong for someone like Akari, that's a pretty big bombshell, but it's a matter of, like, I mean, how do you not confirm a second season, right? Because they're really getting into the thick of this world, and I need to see more anime because I love what the voice actors are doing. I honestly love the production. I've seen quite a bit of criticism towards it, and while it's not always the most visually impressive show of the season, I mean, the past few episodes, absolutely insane, and they know when to really give certain episodes time in the oven, and I think the past few, and most likely what we'll see next week, are those episodes that got a bit more refinement than, say, a few weeks back. But I mean, the show in general looks good. The magic is interesting. It's different than what you're expecting. And it's hard not to have a grin on your face, if not your stomach being a little upset with the shit that you're seeing. It's really interesting, though, how they're really playing with the grotesqueness and the monstrous things. Like the fact that it's not even just like her ripping her arm off for no reason. It's to literally feed these rats to turn them into even more of Satan's spawn. And it's really cool how it doesn't feel like edge for the sake of it. Sometimes when you have those episodes or those shows that are super gory or super graphic, you can say, okay, like this is clearly just you're trying for shock value. But I think the reason that for 2 weeks in a row, I was actually taken back in a positive way, like, hot damn, I didn't see that coming. That's visually disgusting, if not outright horrifying, is because everything served a purpose, whether it was literally seeing someone ripped apart and give birth to this monstrosity, to this episode of that same monstrosity feeding her very weak but very frightening creatures. And the fact that, like, she can do, like, One Piece maneuvers, like, if you didn't get a Luffy impression when she, like, you know, stretched her arm out and came in with that fist attack, I mean, that was One Piece written all over it. But it was horrifying One Piece. It wasn't fun. It wasn't badass. It was horrifying. I mean, this show, it really has done wonders. I think it's a sleeper hit. I think it's an underdog. And I'm hoping we get more than just the 12 episodes that they confirmed for this season, because the plot's interesting. It subverts tropes in good, interesting ways. And honestly, the characters and their relationships really have me excited for more, especially now of what we're seeing here. And just the fact of the matter is, I mean, Akari very well could become something equally, if not insaner than what we're seeing here. The fact that this girl is the weakest out of the four says a hell of a lot, but time will tell. Thoughts and feelings down below. What do you think's going to happen maybe in next week's episode? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. So next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.